And we're live. Well, I'm back, folks. But before I say more, I just want to thank you all for joining me. All of you ladies, gentlemen, extraterrestrials, hybrids, and cryptids to the Fall channel. We'd transitioned out of our original form from being the Fleet Admiral Levi channel into Fall, which is obviously the initials of Fleet Admiral Levi. The storyline that I'm going to try to do and use from that is just this idea that the original Fleet Admiral Levi, as a character, has been disgraced for some reason and has been demoted all the way back down to Commander. So from now on, I'll be Commander Levi, at least in other videos. But for right now, I'll be breaking character and just focusing strictly on what everyone on the internet has been telling me is the worst Star Trek movie ever. Now, that is a very loaded concept for me, since I actually have the unpopular opinion that actually all Star Trek films, save for maybe one or two, are actually pretty watchable, if not actually pretty good in general. So, those two films being obviously Star Trek Nemesis, which I think is close to being um, probably the worst of the pre Kurtzman era, but not because it is a terrible film overall, just actually, I would argue it's actually fairly watchable, but I would say that toward the end, certain decisions are made that I think most of us do disagree with, and most of us have to wait until Picard season 3 to see those actually covered over and made better. So, um, at least to some degree. But generally speaking, I do believe Star Trek Into Darkness is probably the closest to being the most unwatchable of the Star Trek films, strictly due to the fact that um, it deviates so significantly from what I think of as a good Star Trek film and veers off into hackery to a point that I'm just kind of confounded at, because I think simultaneously that film has the best opening, short of Star Trek 2009's opening, uh, because you open up on Nibiru, which is obviously taking some inspiration from the 2012 apocalyptic phenomenon that everybody was hyping up in the late 2000s, early 2010s, and kind of plays with that sort of thing. But um, I think it was a very good start. I mean, Star Trek 2009 and Into Darkness have the best openers, in my opinion. And I think um, it's a shame that the franchise has kind of atrophied a little bit under the Kurtzman administration, we'll call it. And I don't really actually hate most of the work that they've done. I think I'm probably one of the only um, people who will say that on YouTube or say it on social media or say it in public at all. Um, but it has been a few weeks, if not months, since I talked about anything Star Trek related, and yeah, kind of shocked myself. Usually, I live and breathe the franchise. Um, I think it was late, either December or earlier this month. No, I think it was actually December or something like that. I finished Lower Decks, and watching Lower Decks, I was completely. Um, it was bittersweet since I actually do really like Lower Decks, and I wish we could have gotten more seasons. I'm hopeful that we'll see the Lower Decks crew back again at some point in the future. I liked that they ended things not as a concrete, this is goodbye or anything, but more like this is it for now, and we'll continue on later on. And so um, that's heartening to know, and very something that I'm very happy that that's how they chose to end things instead of what could have been the alternative. But beyond that, yeah, the state of Star Trek is rather interesting. We'll get into that a little bit later, but in this episode, yeah, we'll get into the episode in a moment. I just want to kind of highlight um, some of my relationship with Star Trek and how things have been going a little bit so far. So I just started teaching again back at the college. I've we already finished the first week of school. Now in my second semester at the university, learning how to hone my writing skills, and in turn do my best to stay up on everything. That I have all these little balls, floating in the air between my work on Trek Central, which I've been kind of lagging behind extremely, and I want to get back into that since I do have some ideas that I want to move forward with for them, and yeah, I don't want to let that go. There are a lot of great people at Trek Central, and yeah, I wish I could be contributing more than I do. I do plan to. I'm gonna do my best to stick with them, for the next couple of years if I can. If they'll even let me. I'm sure they will. They're a very good bunch of crew there. But between my contributions to the school newspaper, and everything else I have floating around, things are all in flux, and I just wish that I had more time to dedicate myself fully to each thing. And we'll go into all that later. This wasn't exactly the first episode that I wanted us to come back. I mean, I didn't want to come back to YouTube with Section 31, but literally everywhere I'm looking, there was articles everywhere online. Even my own friends, people I know that are associated with Star Trek or have a long history with it, have almost unanimously wrote the thing off. And so that inspired me in a way to want to approach this and even consider watching it. I mean, originally I wasn't really, seeking it out as much as I wanted, or as much as they probably wanted me to, those in charge. And the only reason I did seek it out is because, when something is told to me, or somebody tells me something's going to be bad, um, I think most quote unquote normal people will look at that and say, well, okay, I know not to watch that. That's how the word of mouth works. But when I'm told that something that I love, Star Trek, has produced something that is less than stellar, it piques my curiosity in a way that other things wouldn't. And sometimes, I think I'm very interested in bad films, quote unquote. I'm a big fan of Red Letter Media. I even contribute to their Patreon. Um, Pretty much, I'm always there watching them watch bad movies, and it's like seeing a bunch of friends, gathered around the living room and just having fun. And in that way, I live vicariously through them in some sense. But the thing is, when you're seeing something that's quote unquote bad, you have to kind of think about it as, okay, this thing is bad, but what can you glean from it? What can you take from it that is positive? Sometimes it's jokes. Sometimes it's unintentional gags that pop up. Sometimes it's shoddy special effects. Sometimes it's pretty much any little thing that you can imagine. Uh, you'd be surprised what you're able to take away from something that's quote unquote bad. But that is to say, Section 31 for me wasn't as bad as everybody was saying. Now, it is also not as good as a few people I know have been suggesting. Now, I've heard the comparisons made to certain other franchises that J.J. Abrams is associated with, but we'll get into that too. So, right now, I'm just one solitary man on the internet, casting my words and opinions and anything else into the ether in the hopes that someone somewhere will resonate with it. Now, they tell me that you can do this stuff for years and years and get nobody to respond, which is, perfectly okay. I don't do it for the clicks. I don't do it for the subs. I do it strictly because, in a way, I like to express myself. And I think there's a term, dance like no one's listening or no one's watching. And in this case, I'm doing something similar with my own little song and dance, if you will. So let's get to the thing. So Section 31 opens with, I think, was sort of a riff on the Close Encounters theme song. or the five tones is the way I interpreted it. Although apparently this is not the case, so I found that interesting. Um, it moves further into a flashback where we're sent back to the Terran Empire, and it'll throw these like 3D art words up, which in general I'm okay with since I was a big fan of Fringe and they did that a lot. But yeah, and here there's sort of weird, bizarre things. I'm still not exactly sure how Emperor Giorgio was able to, because it seems like she went, because according to into the narrative and into the visuals, which we'll get into the visuals too, there's a lot of very suspect camera work, and I feel like a lot of this was done not in camera but in post, which adds a whole nother layer of fear to me. But okay, and then we'll go over this summary, and then we'll dive into the problems with it. And there might be an issue where I might have to go back and forth between the two because it's kind of hard to address the entire thing, at least the way that I think um, some people will. So I'll do my best, regardless. So yeah, we're on the Terran homeworld, otherwise known as Earth. She's seeing her family, and then for some reason or another, because it opens up actually with a quote, something by I think an ancient Greek or ancient Roman philosopher. I could be mistaken. English or an ancient Roman or ancient Greek philosopher. I forget which one. But essentially, they're one second. Excuse me. So anyway, the movie begins with them on the Terran homeworld doing this thing, and it appears that young Emperor Giorgio is there to um, see her family for the first time and whatever. And it opens up with a quote about fate, and the fate concept is an interesting one to bring up since I think that invites the concept of destiny, which I'm never really been a big fan of when you include that in any work of fiction, because you're basically telling us that someone doesn't have to work as hard as they should because everything's just preordained by the God on high, and that's never really been a compelling plot line for me. It works for some people, but for me, it's not. Doesn't work. But she basically comes in, kills her family for some reason or another. I think that's just to show how brutal she is, which I don't think really works as well as I think they think, or as well as the producers probably thought it did. Um, after that, someone comes in, some higher up in the Terran Empire comes in, and they bequeath Emperor Giorgio uh, the role of emperor, which I think is kind of strange because a lot of things happen like in rapid succession. Like her family gets killed, and then they roll up, and then we're introduced to her, I guess, love interest, which kind of comes out of a little nowhere, and then yeah, they're over there doing their thing in a flashback, another flashback onto a flashback, and then it comes back to them. She goes and like scars the side of his face, and I guess somehow or another he disappears for a little bit, and then we come back to some space station or something or other, and we're basically left with sort of a rogues gallery of like Section 31 folks. We don't know that yet, but because of all the promotion, we kind of know who it's going to be and who we're going to trust, who we're not going to trust. And so we're left to conclude that Emperor Giorgio is smarter than she lets on because she already knows everyone's there. Everyone there is from Section 31. Oh, no, no. I'm getting too far ahead of myself. So in the run up to that sequence, we're shown this idea that is basically something right out of Mission Impossible, which I think just short of. This is Jamie Lee Curtis talking. She comes back at the end too, but this is just her voice at the moment. So actually, this is the first time Jamie Lee Curtis has been in Star Trek, which I think is great conceptually. And I'm saddened that this might be the only time we'll see her in a Star Trek. Um, I'd hope this not to be the case, but I have a feeling it probably will be. So I should just be happy with that. But yeah, sad. But anyway, what can you do? So from that, little Mission Impossible sequence, which, like I said, if Jamie Lee Curtis had said, your mission, should you choose to accept it, I would have lost my shit because that would have been amazing and hokey and terrible. But luckily, that doesn't happen. That's not what makes that bad or anything. So we're on the space station, some kind of bar or some kind of like nightclub kind of vibes. Apparently, she's killed the person who originally owned it, and then um, the guy who looks like Common, who is not Common. Somebody had told me that this particular actor doesn't have the personality needed to fill that role. I disagree. I think this guy has a lot more personality than Common has in Silo, but I actually like Common as a person. So really, I can't comment on that too terribly much. But okay, so he goes, introduces himself to her, and they kind of get to this whole like conversation about how they were gonna apprehend her, which is kind of convoluted and kind of weird and strange, which is par for the course. So what can you want? Um, yeah, so we're introduced to everybody, the entire cast of the movie. You have the Comaloid, who's based on a race that is first and only time in Star Trek Six, played by Iman, and then we're introduced to a Deltan woman who gets offed pretty quickly, which was kind of surprising to me. And then we're introduced to this kind of Borg-looking figure, but he's really just like he's got like mechanized parts. He's I think they call it. They use the term in the show, something about like I think they're trying to make a pun on body dysmorphia, but it's not. It's like machine dysmorphia or something. And um, I want to say it's the first instance I've noticed. Remember, I have not seen Star Trek Discovery season 4 or 5. I've seen part of season 3. I think I may have finished it. I'm not entirely sure. I don't remember. But I do have the opinion that Discovery got better when they made that shift over to the fourth millennium. But before I'm not going to get too into Discovery right now, even though that's where she came from. So ultimately, you have this attack, which I believe is made against what many people have called woke ideology, which, quote unquote, the woke mind virus, is also Elon Musk has said. Personally, I think a lot of that's overblown. A lot of it's very uninteresting as a concept. I'm not going to debate those ideas, but I feel like it's a lot of that. I've heard the critical drinker talk about it. I've heard friends of mine talk about it. I've heard a lot of people talk about it, and I'm kind of over it. I think it's very lazy intellectually to kind of even express that anything is woke, at least in anything that I believe is sort of shoddily explained and shoddily reasoned. Um, there's a big counterculture movement going through this country at the moment, and probably throughout the world, that I feel like is predicated on people who don't really know what's going on in the world, and so you have this big push for it. And so I think this is the first time I've noticed that they were kind of attacking the idea of it, because I mean, right after they mentioned that he has machine dysmorphia, he launches into like you know a bit of offensive reaction, and that is kind of fascinating to me as an idea too. Although he kind of ended up being kind of like a favorite character. Like, I wouldn't say favorite, maybe just like somebody I liked a little bit more than the rest of them. So it was kind of sad to see that character get killed. Spoiler alert for those of you who aren't going to watch it. But when that happened, that was shocking in a way. And then we were introduced to this like Vulcan character that is not really a Vulcan. It's a like automaton of sorts. Like it's a machine body that a smaller creature, like a nanite character or something, a really small creature, is able to take control of and use to its own means. And then that character turns out to be the villain by the end of this thing. And yeah, a lot of that's a little bit too Saturday morning cartoon shit for me. But for whatever reason, they there's a big propensity in a lot of this Star Trek stuff these days, at least in some of the ideas that I've seen with the Kurtzman Trek stuff. And I mean, I would go so far as to say this has been a problem with Star Trek forever, but some would disagree with it. And we'll get to that too. But yeah, so I might skip over some points because a lot of it can be skipped. So I'm just going to talk about it in broad strokes as best I can. So from there, we end up going from introducing everybody. I think I may have addressed everything. Oh, we haven't gotten to Lieutenant at this time, Rachel Garrett. So she, as a character, I think could have been anyone, which implies that the producers or the writers had this idea to have a thread of Rachel Garrett that would carry on through potentially more movies, or this was originally envisioned as a TV show, so I imagine more episodes, more seasons, and whatever that would have ended up resulting in is probably never going to be realized. We'll also get to that too. So I don't know what's going on. None of us do. But ultimately, we probably, um, I don't know what the numbers are going to do for this. Maybe the fact that this is so bad might pique the curiosity of the few that want to, or maybe it'll be so bad that many people will be afraid to, and then that's probably what kills it as a potential thread that we could follow on through the franchise. Now, the biggest problem with this film is that, unlike how they've done it in the past with certain other, like, I mean, even Picard season 3 was not immune to this, but at least Picard season 3 was able to do it in a way that didn't feel as bad in a sense. Like, so every Star Trek film, I've been saying for the longest time, has tried to remake Wrath of Khan in some way. It's like producers everywhere, writers everywhere, directors everywhere recognize that Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, is the best Star Trek film. Now, sure, I think that's a widely well publicized opinion. I mean, I really like it. Um, I've not done a Star Trek, best Star Trek movies thing yet. At some point, I probably will. But no, in general, it's just, kind of fascinating to me that they have to keep going back to this film because it's the most successful, so it gets the most asses in seats, it gets the most attention. And so they've tried to remake it multiple times, even before Kurtzman and his era of Star Trek. So, I mean, you go back to um, Generations, it's not about a villain who is trying to go for revenge. First Contact, it's not about a villain who wants revenge necessarily, but there's a way that that's done that's a little more interesting in a sense that, the Borg Queen is out there trying to attack Earth by preventing uh, Star Trek Starfleet from happening, and there's nothing wrong with that as an idea. It's not a revenge thing necessarily. She's doing it strictly to prevent her biggest adversary from proliferating and expanding through space, and that would make them better in a way. So that's different. And then Insurrection, it's not about revenge, at least against anybody in Star Trek or Starfleet. It's revenge against the Baku, because Adar Ruwaffel, his whole thing was that he wanted to basically take the shit from the rings and then, make the was it metaphasic particles or whatever it was. He wanted to make that. It was like the recipe for the Fountain of Youth, and so them taking it and them using it would have made them better, and they wouldn't have to do the fucking Beverly Hills plastic surgery type of shit to make them younger. So in that sense, um, that's also about it's a different type of revenge. Looking at it differently. Nemesis is probably the first time they tried to remake The Wrath of Khan. So with that, they created a villain out of nowhere, which was played by Tom Hardy. His name was Shinzon. He was a clone of Captain Picard, and his whole thing was that he was going not on a revenge spree against the Romulan Empire necessarily, but he was also going to go after Starfleet for whatever reason. And that was the first time we'd seen that happen, where the villain was obviously sort of like a Khan knockoff, because that's what he did. He nominates himself as Praetor of the Romulan Empire, sort of. And so that's kind of where they were trying to go with it, and I don't know if that ever succeeded. So after that, you ended up going to Star Trek 2009, the second time they tried to remake The Wrath of Khan. And that one was done in a way that was still a little bit better. I mean, the villain still wanted revenge, but it was done in a way that was a little bit more impressive, I'll say. So what do they do in Star Trek Into Darkness? They literally, this is the fourth time they tried to remake it, but it's the first time they've ever had to actually bring in Khan, except now played by a English actor, Benedict Cumberbatch. And so bringing that into the whole situation was very bizarre, since I think the film would have functioned probably better had they not grasped for some sense of nostalgia bait and just let him be, Commander John Harrison, just a rogue Starfleet officer. Yes, it would still be revenge based, but at least it would be not trying to remake the Wrath of Khan. And they literally have a scene at the end of Into Darkness, which I'm not surprising or even, everybody knows who's a Star Trek fan knows what scene it is. And it's inverted the situation that was in Star Trek The Wrath of Khan, where Spock was in the chamber, now it's Captain Kirk, and now it's flipped around. So I don't know if that means it's good. I certainly don't think it means that it's good, but I'm just surprised that they even went through with it and made that a thing. So it's happened. It's a thing, whatever. So Star Trek Beyond comes out, and what do we have? We have yet another revenge flick, but this time it's a little different because now the person who wants revenge is a genetically altered ex Starfleet early Federation captain, and at least that's what that gets revealed as. And so he wants revenge against Starfleet, against Federation, whatever. And so that's yet another fucking revenge plot. So okay, whatever. At least it's not Khan. So now we get ourselves. This is just the movies I'm focusing on. They've tried to redo it again a couple of times, because sort of like Discovery has gone on this path, at least from what I've noticed. I haven't seen the last two seasons, like I said, but the first two seasons and the third, I believe, have all had this sort of plot line designed strictly around, there's like a central mystery that they're trying to solve, but for whatever reason, someone's going to get in the way. And then by the time we get to it, we find out that, revenge is not a good thing. So in season one, it's about the mirror universe. The villain is Captain Lorca, or the mirror version of Captain Lorca. Season two, it's the AI control, which is using it again like some kind of convoluted sort of plot, Skynet, but in the Federation. So okay, whatever, it's fine. But ultimately, what we end up with too is a situation where that's sort of the main plot. And the thing about Strange New Worlds as well is that it didn't have to resort to that either, to an extent, because it's doing more of an episodic, seasonal arc situation, which I think is better. Lower Decks did season long, had an episodic format, but the thing that was different about it was that ultimately there was like a tiny thread that was woven through the entire season, at least in the last three seasons, where it would ultimately get resolved in some interesting way. At least I thought it was interesting. And for a comedy animated show, I mean, I think it did really well structurally doing that. Prodigy, I think, was the first one that had the episodic stuff, but also it was sort of doing a similar thing. It was also animated. Also, that one's for kids. And I really like Prodigy. And so that's why I'm so surprised that this is what ended up happening. So the long and the short of it is that this film, Section 31, picks up the same exact problem that affected the movies, especially the Kelvin universe movies, which was now we have a character who's out for revenge. And who is this character but the person that she was in love with that she burned the face of? So, Burned Face Man, Melted Face Man, is the former lover of Emperor Giorgio. And now she's going to have to deal with that because he was instrumental in building this device called the Godsend, which they try to do a joke of, called God's End, which I think they could have made a better joke had there been more of, like, I don't know, something to do with a deity to make that make sense. I think it's a proto joke. I think it could have been a little bit more expanded, in my opinion. But yes, so in all my years of screenwriting, novel writing, writing in general, reading, watching, doing all the things like that. I mean, I don't actively hate on anything. Like, I think the critical. I would love to get invited on the Critical Drinkers show just so I could, like, not pick his brain because I don't think there's much there. But I would say just to discuss with him the flaws in his perspective because I feel like he personally doesn't really believe all the shit he says. I think that most of the time he's just saying it to get a rise out of his audience and increase engagement, which is perfectly fine. Everybody's doing it, and I don't play that game. I try to see things how they are. I try to give everyone an even shake. I don't try to do something where I'm trying to make some kind of political statement or whatever. I mean, some have said that you can do things by omission are automatically political, and I kind of believe with that. I kind of believe that in a sense, but actively making a decision when you're writing something and you know writing something to where you're exploring something in a way that's a little bit too heavy-handed. And I do think that there's elements of Discovery that were a little too heavy-handed. I'll be the first one to say that it's borderline cringy when there's a scene, I think, in season three, middle of season three, where they're talking to, I think it's Gray, and it's like you have now, we now have you, or you are seen, or you feel seen, or whatever. And as an idea, I'm fine with it because I don't mind people literally being seen, for who they are. But I feel like it's very, it comes out, that came off as probably the most cheesy moment in Discovery. And I feel like there's a way to have done that in a way that actually is a little more, I don't want to say thoughtful, but a little bit more tasteful, if you will, because I felt like that was a little too bizarre as an idea. I know they're trying to go for it, and I feel like I'm fine with all the different flavors that Star Trek comes in these days, but all I'm looking for is something that comes in as quality. And I disagree with a lot of my contemporaries that say that Star Trek is bad now because there's plot holes, and I'm like, there's plot holes in the original series, there's plot holes in the Next Generation, there's plot holes in everything that you write. It's rare to write anything without plot holes. And if you're trying to plug all your plot holes, I think you're kind of missing the forest for the trees, and you ultimately lose track of your characters, your uh, setting elements, your plot elements. You're losing track of the whole thing in favor of just trying to be internally narratively consistent. And a lot of times it's not going to work. A lot of times the best stories, if you take a few more minutes to kind of dig through a lot of the elements of them, they'll kind of unravel. Um, this is definitely part of the problem with a lot of M. Night's work, M. Night Shyamalan, especially his early work. Even though I'm a really big fan of his work in his early years, it kind of feels like if you are just watching it and you actively start pulling threads on it, the thing will unravel very fast. And I think that's part of the problem with his stuff. But I also don't think his stories are meant to be um, that deeply dissected. So I honestly can't say that his work it lends itself to like deeper exploration. So, but I don't think his work is like emblematic of what Star Trek should be doing because M Night stuff is more of a mix of like being emotionally invested more than being psychologically invested, and I feel like that's kind of his wheelhouse. And I do appreciate him trying to go back to his roots in some way. I mean, Trap, I didn't think it was too bad as a movie. Is it his best? Probably not. I think he's going to be living in the shadow of The Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, and Signs probably for the remainder of his life, unless he magically creates something new. I'm not opposed to some filmmaker trying to do better than themselves. I'm definitely opposed to a filmmaker getting a little too big headed and thinking that they can, master the universe and do, crazy shit like what we saw with Francis Ford Coppola and his Megalopolis movie, which I have not seen. I wanted to see, didn't get around to it. I think I spent my budget on 3 hour epics just this past month. I've seen The Brutalist 3 times, once with my friend and with my best friend, once with my folks and my brother, and then another time with my fiance. And I don't know. I think it's a great film, but I do think my body is slowly but surely waning on 3 hour epics, even though I do love them. I mean, I loved Babylon. I still go to watch the Avatar movies in the theater when they come out. So, you know, I guess I'm not averse to it, but in other words, um, it can be a little self indulgent. I mean, Killers of the Flower Moon was also another one that was over 3 hours. Also great, but again, it falls into that indulgent territory. And if I was making movies, I definitely keep it to about 90 to 120 minutes. But yeah, so I'm getting off on a tangent. So anyway, so the thing is, bringing it way back, when you make movies like these things, and you try to remake Wrath of Khan, you try to do all these elements, you don't do them that well. You end up with something like Section 31. And again, I like bad movies, but this one isn't bad enough to where I think I'd rewatch it. I was actually considering about halfway through considering this film to be watchable if you think of everything as a comedy. And and I think only that would have made it probably a little bit more fun to watch. So there's that to consider. So if you want, I would recommend you watch it with a very sarcastic eye. And I don't know, come back and report back to me and let me know what you see, if it made it better. But now I forget where we left off. So yeah, so afterwards we find out that the big thing, the big I don't know, the God's end thing, the device. Um, so we find out that that's like the universe ending, quadrant ending, whatever. That's another thing that I'm getting tired of. Like I want to get rid of these like evil MacGuffin things, like Mission Impossible 3 is Rabbit's Foot. Like as an idea at the time, 2006, I thought it was great. I even thought Philip Seymour Hoffman was the best villain that the Mission Impossible franchise has had. But when you over rely on elements like that, you end up turning your film into something that um, literally is something you just watch for like 90 minutes and then get out. And so it doesn't add anything. And I think that they wanted to make a Mission Impossible film in the Star Trek universe, but it's not clever enough and it's not good enough to do that. And, I'm one of the people who say that the Mission Impossible films, especially after Mission Impossible 3, have gotten exponentially better. This film was more like Mission Impossible 2. And I know there's a lot of people who like it. If I'm really, really bored, I might put it on, but it's not something I'm rushing at. Like if I do a marathon, that's pretty much the only way I'd watch it because I'm trying to get to the better films. So I'll definitely be doing a Mission Impossible rewatch at some point soon in my own personal life. Probably won't be tied to this channel. I mean, if there's sort of an interest in it, I might do it, but I'm not going to rush out to upload any of that to this channel. Although I am considering certain things in light of certain results um, from certain videos that have gotten popular on this channel the last couple of months, which surprised me, but in a way made me kind of happy because um, the 2 videos that have done pretty well have surprised me. Because I mean, there was the Dragon Riders of Pern deep dive I did, and then there's the Dragon Riders of Pern um, AI video that I generated. And a lot of people have commented saying that the video is not accurate and all that. And I'm like, that's kind of the point of these experiments, is to find out what the AI gets wrong. And there's a lot of things even I know that it got wrong. I didn't correct any of it because I wanted to, you know, let it do its own thing. But so far, that video has like over 1,500 or 1.5K, so about 1,500 views, which surprises me. I never anticipated Pern to actually be the most popular video on my channel, but it is still the reigning champ. And in that way, I'm pretty satisfied with how far this channel has come, even though we're, not where I wanted us to be at the start of the year. I think we're still making some pretty good progress. We're at 83 subs. Hopefully, we can expand that lead. The goal for last year was to get us to 100. We're getting closer at the moment, but we're not quite to the 100 that I would have liked at the start of the year. But we're going to aim a little bit higher this year. We're probably going to end up hoping for a grand by the end of the year, because we're going to be doing more videos, especially some more lives. We're going to do some more short video content. We're going to do some more video essays even, and in some other long form videos as well that won't be just tied to that. So I hope everyone joins us for that. I think you guys will have a lot of fun. But for a minute, I think we kind of went over time for the ad time, but let's do the ads. The fall channel is brought to you by Vega Aerospace. Vega Aerospace, in space. No one can hear you. All right. Now we're back from the ad break. So basically, the whole film kind of goes on this idea, and the Vulcan character, who I think a lot of people are going to find annoying, Vulcan robot character. Now, that character I thought was interesting in a sense, especially since that character was like an Irish. I don't know if the actors, I don't know anything about any of the actors except for Michelle Yeoh, but the actor that's playing the character is at least putting on an Irish accent for that specific Vulcan robot. But for right now, I think I'll call that character the Falcon, the fake Vulcan. So that person turns out to be the sort of, not the central villain of the thing, like the secondary villain, because the primary villain of this movie is the lover of Emperor Giorgio, and that is kind of weird, fascinating onto its own self. So ultimately, by the end of this thing, I'm convinced that this movie is not meant for a Star Trek going audience. This movie is meant for people who don't watch Star Trek and are kind of just trying to see another kind of story done in the Star Trek universe. And this movie is meant to attract people who want to do that. So anyway, long story short, by the end of the thing, we end up in this, I don't know, kind of nebula thing or something. And there's a lot of fighting that happens on the planet, and they find out there's a whole mystery going back and forth. Who could be the guy who killed the machine dysphoria guy, who killed the the same person they assume killed the Delton lady. And it's like, I thought these people were going to be characters who were going to carry on through the rest of the series / movie series or whatever this would end up being, and apparently not. So we find out that our core group is essentially not common. Oh, no. I'm sorry. We know what we're going to call him. We're going to call him Uncommon. So Uncommon is partnered up. He's like the main guy for Section 31. And then we have the Falcon, the fake Vulcan, who is at least part of the team for a minute and then becomes the bad guy, or becomes secondary bad guy. And then in terms of the Falcon and Uncommon, so we have Uncommon, which I think was what we're going to call him, because he's not common, I assure you. The actor that's playing this character guy is uncommon. So on top of that, we ended up with this situation where they're the primary characters, as well as Rachel Garrett, and we have our Kamaloid character on top of Emperor Giorgio. So that's our primary cast for this thing, and they're going up against the love interest, and the love interest is basically wanting to get this thing to destroy whatever to get her attention or something. It's not really that clear. He wants revenge for some reason, and yeah, like cartoons, Saturday night or Saturday morning cartoon level villainy, and that's the kind of shit that's kind of grating for me at the moment. So whatever the case is, it's happening. It's what it is. We just got to live with it ultimately, at least for a little bit. So I believe Kurtzman's contract is up in 2026. So we'll have to find out. And I know there's a lot of people who complain about some of the specifics of where Star Trek's going, and I think we'll try to address that too before we're done. But yeah, so by the end of this thing, there's kind of a funny thing that happens that's objectively kind of funny. With like this alien doll thing that Rachel Garrett uses because she's a scientist, so she uses her science skills to kind of like build a bomb or something, and it works and kills the little creature that's inside the Vulcan man, and so that ultimately I think kills the love interest too. So basically, that's how that ends. So and this is like super broad strokes. So ultimately, by the end of it, we cut to 3 weeks later. They're back on that nightclub space station thing, and the oh yeah, by the way, so there's I think I may have mentioned it at the nightclub thing. There's a woman, an alien woman thing that is a blue alien that is almost 100%, I think, a nod or a ripoff of the little blue alien lady from The Fifth Element, and that person pops up in the beginning and the end. I think this is like supposed to represent some kind of a bookend. Whether or not successful in this is up to you to figure out. But by the end of it, we have our primary characters. Rachel Garrett has been promoted to lieutenant commander for some reason. It's not clear if it is because of the events that she was on helping Section 31 or if it was just, um, you know, some other circumstance that happened right afterwards or something to that effect. It's unclear. But whatever the case is, she's now been promoted, and I guess she's going to have oversight over this Section 31 thing via being a Starfleet officer. Not sure that's how that works. But there's a lot of little elements that I saw through it that I thought was very suspect. I know there's going to be tons of people talking about it over the next few months and years ahead. And I won't belabor those points, but whatever the case is, I believe that this film is probably going to end up being the worst Star Trek film for a lot of people. I don't think it's quite there. I just think it's somewhere above Into Darkness, somewhere um, below Nemesis. Like it's very, very much middling, and I think that's most of the problem in itself. And I feel like when you do something like this and you try to contribute something to Star Trek, to the history of it, you're going to have a lot of people having opinions, and a lot of people are going to either have very extreme, like, oh, I really loved it, or you're going to have the complete opposite, where people are going to be like, oh, I completely hated it, and almost no middle ground. And I don't think my view represents a middle ground at all, but I feel like I'm trying to have a voice of reason here, and I think that you know, calling this the worst ever is a bit much. Calling it the best ever is way, way much. Um, where it leaves off definitely leaves room for something else later because we actually end up with the Falcon, well, a Falcon that is not the same character, but is also just another um, robot Vulcan who I guess has a little nanite creature that is supposed to be the wife of the character that they killed, just like the scene before. So I don't know how that's going to work, but now the Falcon has a Texas accent or a Texan accent, and it's quite a sea change from the Irish accent that the character had prior. So I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe we won't see. But I think we're getting to the next section of the issue. So kind of introduced where the channel is at, and I've talked a little bit lengthy about the summary of this story, this movie. Now, I'm always one to say that if you want to watch it, go watch it. I'm not going to tell you not to. You should definitely seek it out if you're just curious or if you think that um, you're wondering how this could go. I would definitely never say don't watch it because someone else told you to watch it or someone else told you not to watch it. So just do it it's your own prerogative and see where you go with it. But I think we're going to get to the next section, which is let's talk about the elephant in the room, the status of the Star Trek franchise. Now, it has been about, and I haven't talked about Star Trek in like 3 months, and I feel like that's a bit too much. Like it was September the last time I talked about Star Trek. And when I last talked about it, we were talking about Star Trek Enterprise. And Star Trek Enterprise is one of my favorite series, primarily, I think, because I grew up watching it when it was airing. And it was, at least for a good many years, the first Star Trek show that I was able to watch from start to finish. But the first Star Trek show I was able to see live in person as a human that was born um, alive and cognizant of the reality that I lived in was Star Trek Voyager. And Star Trek Voyager was very instrumental in formulating a lot of my beliefs, especially my views toward women, which is kind of surprising considering that Star Trek Voyager may or may not be the best representation of that, despite the fact that it has a female captain. Um, for me, I can definitely see an argument that Star Trek Voyager may have damaged my view on women and also reinforced it. So I have no idea. But personally, I think that Captain Janeway is my favorite captain. I'm not saying she's the best captain. I'm just saying that she's my favorite because she's somebody who, while growing up, I felt exemplified a certain level of leadership that um, even I would want to represent or emulate. And Seven of Nine, which probably won't surprise anybody. She has a physicality that a lot of us men do appreciate, and that probably played a little bit of a role in how I see women. But I don't. I think that's more to speaking to a level of attractiveness, not to a level of objectification, which can be kind of synonymous if it's not applied correctly. But either way, if it wasn't for Star Trek Voyager, there's a good chance you wouldn't have the kind of person I am today. So let's see what the status of the franchise is. So basically, if you'll excuse me, we got a few points to address. So Star Trek is my beloved franchise. It is the one that turned into a gateway for me to the broad spectrum of science fiction. I do credit my dad with being the person that was first on the scene to get me interested in science fiction in general. If it wasn't for him, I probably wouldn't be where I am right now in terms of many different things, not just including my love of science fiction. I was very blessed or um, fortunate to have had a father that was so um, impactful on my life in a positive way. And I know a lot of men these days didn't have that. And I think that's kind of another issue that we'll get into probably in the commentary corner episodes. There's a broader conversation to be had about fatherhood and masculinity because I feel there's a lot of chaos agents out there that are trying to take the conversation and lead it to some stupid way that I think is generally bad for the rest of us men and society at whole as a whole. So in general, we got a problem. The franchise, as we know it, is going to turn 60 years old next year in 2026. And I plan to be there for the 60th. That's a big number that I won't miss. But for whatever the case, whatever the problems, the franchise has been run basically by one guy since 2009. And I think we're approaching the point in time where his tenure running the Star Trek franchise will outlast or overcome the entire duration that Rick Berman was in charge of the franchise. I think it already has actually overcome the duration that Rick Berman had the franchise, and I think that it's well, surpassed the Gene Roddenberry era. So, you know, Kurtzman has left a indelible mark on the franchise, possibly forever. But his imprint on the franchise is only going to last so long. And I don't know who they're going to appoint, if they're planning to extend his contract. I don't know if they're going to, especially with how things might look at it for the economy in a couple of years. I don't know how that's going to affect Hollywood. I mean, it's just been compounding in Hollywood. I mean, you've had the COVID-19 shutdowns, then you had the strikes, the double strike, and then you had the concerns about AI, and then you've had the fires recently, which don't really affect the Toronto part of this for the franchise. It only affects the LA based stuff. So either way, it's a shock to the system that ultimately ends up causing this slowdown in the franchise. And I think that's going to cause who knows what levels of havoc over the next few years. I mean, I would hope that the franchise would change hands to someone else that I feel, because I think Kurtzman sees the franchise a certain way, but I feel like he sees the franchise in a way that he wants to approach it in a way that makes sense to him, and it makes sense to the producers and the executive producers at Paramount who are making all the shot calls. And I feel like that sort of mentality is foolhardy. And there's a guy that I argue with on occasion on Twitter. I think his name's John Delarose. And yeah, I hardly disagree or hardly agree with anything he says, mostly because I think he attacks the issue from a very biased position. I mean, he would probably say the same of me. I'd invite him on the show because I don't believe in having people I don't believe in canceling people I disagree with. I know people like Steve Shives is definitely somebody who would definitely do that out of a sense of ideological purity. And I don't have that kind of inclination, regardless of how people like him or anyone else would see me. I think that it's wrong. I think it kind of puts things off balance. He may disagree with it, and that he's free to do that. But whatever the case is, Star Trek is for everyone. Star Wars is for everyone. These sci-fi things are for everybody. And ultimately, what I try to do is create a space where even people I disagree with are welcome on to talk. I mean, there's people that associate with the group that I think hates me the most, and that's the Knights of Melvin folks. And yeah, they're the ones that are constantly trying to like paint me as some kind of radical communist, which I find very amusing. But yeah, these guys are slowly but surely becoming the norm online, at least from what I'm seeing. Maybe I'm not subscribing to the right channels, but they're the ones getting the most play. They're the ones getting the most reactions, the most engagement on social media, on forums. They're getting the most play because ultimately, what makes the most, or what gets the most clicks, what gets the most reactions is opinions that go supposedly against the mainstream, that go against the prevailing wisdom. And oftentimes, I think this manifests in ways that are not only toxic but very, not even problematic. Just things that are just outrightly morally incorrect. But for whatever reason, um, these people will take the moral high ground out of a sense of a misguided attempt to be righteous for whatever reason. I mean, they're mostly about attacking Star Wars and its problems, which I don't remember the last time I watched a Star Trek property. so or a Star Wars property. But at some point, I do. I'm vaguely interested in Skeleton Crew. I mean, I want to finish Andor. I think I watched the first or second episode, and so I want to finish that before the second season comes up. I mean, there's a lot to talk about, and it goes on and on. But again, let's get back to the problem. So right now, the franchise is entertaining, or rather, the studio is entertaining the thought of selling the franchise to, I don't know. We'll see who they try to sell it to, because right now I think there's another bid that's come up that's kind of interesting, but ultimately I don't know what's going to come of that. I mean, I would hope that there would be something doable from it that'll benefit the franchise, but I'm not convinced of it. Um, I don't know who they would get to take it over. I mean, I know who I'd like to get to take it over and to run Star Trek, but that person's not going to be in charge, regardless of the way I feel about it. I'd get somebody like the creator of Lower Decks, or even the guys who do Prodigy, to do it. Those are in the system. I know the one I would really like to see try to do it. No, he really want to do it would be Seth MacFarlane, but I think he did pretty good with the Orville. I still haven't seen the Orville season 3. I want to see it, but for whatever reason, they're not going to have him do it. They're not going to have those guys do it either. They're going to pick somebody they know would be pliable to push whatever agenda they want for the elites in charge. That's just the mo. But whatever the case is, I think we've seen the last of Section 31. My prediction, and my predictions kind of go one way or the other. Um, the Section 31 movie will do not very well. People will be convinced by the word of mouth that it's bad, and they'll stop watching. And then that'll be it. It'll be done. The Section 31 movie series or even TV show that may have come from this is done. There's nothing going to come out of it. I mean, I think that you don't come back from a Rotten Tomato score that's low. So I mean, I think they can try, but I don't think they can. When something is that low, it's pretty much a certainty that you're not getting anything going forward, especially if you don't do numbers. And I do think a lot of the controversy about it being bad is probably going to drum up a little bit of publicity, but I think it's going to be negative press. I mean, I have been of the opinion that bad press is no. There's no such thing as bad press, but I think in this case, the bad press is going to kill it, and so that's going to be it. It's going to be over. But the one thing I did think was cool was Jamie Lee Curtis shows up at the very end in person. I didn't think that was going to happen. I heard her voice and I was like, oh, it's going to be the only time we hear her. But no, she comes back at the end. So Jamie Lee Curtis is in Star Trek for maybe less than a minute. So I think that's the best thing that came from this. Some people may disagree, but I'll take the positives where I can. But yeah, right now, I think we're getting no Star Trek movies anytime soon. I think that they may, because I know studios are very stupid in the sense that okay, this TV movie didn't do good, so we'll swear off all TV movies, which I think would be really stupid. But you got to think like a studio executive, and you got to make the most dumbest decision possible, and that would be the dumbest decision possible. Which if you kill the TV movies, you're going to kill the films, and yeah, that'll be it for that um, arena of the Star Trek franchise. And so I think this is going to probably end up being the last time we see anything associated with Section 31 in the franchise for a good minute. And the crazy part of it is that this was Kurtzman's baby. Like, this is the thing he wanted to make for like the longest fucking time. And now that it's been made, now that it's out, now that it's done, and now that it's probably going to go nowhere, like, I wonder where his head is at, because he's only got like a year and a half left as the grand poobah of the franchise, and so what's going to happen? I think these questions will probably not be answered until it happens. But whatever the case is, I think his tenure is probably going to wrap up pretty soon. I would be surprised if they continue. we'll see. Um, the Star Trek Starfleet Academy thing. Now, there's a lot of people complaining about that. I am going to be cautiously optimistic, although it seems like everything, at least tangentially related to Discovery, is kind of like withering on the vine. So I don't really see that being a possibility either. Um, I'd say we get probably a season out of Star Trek, or I think they renewed it for another season before it came out. So I think it's going to get its first order, done. The first couple seasons, and then it's done, and then that'll be it. And then I think they're going to do their best to do Strange New Worlds to about 5 seasons as well, and then call it quits. Is my prediction. And then when that happens, when there's no Strange New Worlds, when there's no Star Trek being produced, this will probably be the first time since the gap in between 2005 and 2009 that there'll be no active Star Trek being produced. And I think that in between 2005 and 2017, that was a 12-year gap between Star Trek being produced on TV. So I think we're entering into either a very scary time or into a very, I don't know what you want to call it, very chaotic time where things are so in flux that it could go either way. And I am a little fearful of the franchise. And I think it'll be sad to end the franchise like this on its 60th birthday, no less. I think that would be absolutely horrific, absolutely just devastating. I actually think they should produce a movie sometime this year to air next year as part of the 60th anniversary. But I know they're not going to because the studios are really stupid, really fucking stupid. But that's how these guys operate. That's how they've always been. And that's one of the reasons why if I ever produce my own stuff, my own entertainment company, I will not associate with Hollywood bigwigs because they're some of the stupidest, penny pinching, money hungry sons of bitches that you've ever seen in your life. And they're not there for the art. They're not there to appreciate whatever the thing that's being produced is. They're there to primarily reap the benefits of it without doing any of the work. And I know that some people would say it's like a leftist opinion because you're basically trying to attack the top. And I'm like, well, if that's a leftist opinion, then fuck it. Why not? But ultimately, these guys are the ones destroying the franchise, not Kurtzman. Because ultimately, Kurtzman is the one who is only executing the plans and the whims of the executives. And now that his baby, Section 31, has maybe potentially flopped, we'll see what the results are at the end of the weekend. If this thing does do numbers, which I don't anticipate it to do, especially given the press and the fact that the last time I checked it, it was at 16% on Rotten Tomatoes. I don't see how you come away. I don't see how you come back from that in any meaningful way, regardless of who you have in it. This movie had 2 Academy Award winners in Michelle Yeoh and Jamie Lee Curtis, both for the same movie, no less. And that alone can't do anything for it. So I think it's a tragedy. But personally, I think as a concept, I'm okay with a Mission Impossible-esque kind of thing set in the Star Trek universe. But how it's executed here, and also I wanted to mention the visuals. So there's like a post production like editing thing that happens where there's a lot of snap zooms like everywhere, and it's like very bizarre. Like I've never seen this happen. It feels like somebody watched the 2003 Battlestar Galactica and was like, I want to do that, but for no reason. Because like when it's done in Battlestar Galactica, it's done because it's supposed to mimic cinema verite. So it's supposed to resemble like there's a guy in a spacesuit who's doing these like snap zooms and stuff. So it's supposed to put us there in the moment. It makes no sense for this. It makes no sense from a cinematography, perspective to shoot your movie like that, let alone edit like that in post. Because if you're going to do something like that in post, you're automatically saying to the audience that you're trying to make this thing gritty and real when you have everything around it that's not. Like there's no snap zooms in the Mission Impossible movie. It's always like very fluid, very like static shots that are done exquisitely because you have some of the best filmmakers currently working making these movies. But and then you have Tom Cruise on top of that who appreciates the art of film, who appreciates cinema. Here you have a man who, and I want to make sure I pronounce his name correctly. And in general, I don't really have a problem with him as a person. I think he might be all right as a person. But as a filmmaker, his career has been kind of off. And him being associated with Star Trek is kind of surprising. So the director of Section 31 is Olatunde Osun Sonami. So I know him from a movie that came out years and years ago called The Fourth Kind. And I saw this movie when I was, I don't know, I think that came out, I want to say, let's look it up just to be safe. 2009. Wow. So, yeah, he's actually in the movie because he's supposed to be hosting some kind of a thing where he's interviewing an alien abductee from Chapman University. And I'll shout out to Chapman University. I appreciate you guys at Chapman for accepting me as part of your MFA program. I'm sorry that I had to decline your invitation, but um, your financial aid would have been too high. So anyway, I would have gone there. That was my second choice. But he also directed, I think, an episode of Timeless. I liked Timeless. Never saw Sleepy Hollow. And apparently he directed a ton of episodes of Star Trek Discovery, which kind of surprised me. And then he did an episode of After Trek, did a couple episodes of the Short Treks. He's been on the Ready Room a couple of times. And then, yeah, this was his first feature film in a minute. Well, he had supposedly written a science fiction film, kind of like the movie Apollo 18. Apollo 18 was like a horror film where, these astronauts would, like Apollo era astronauts, go to the moon after we've stopped going, supposedly, and they find something on the moon. Anyway, he wanted to do a thing where the script was called The Dark Side of the Moon, and I was very fascinated by the concept because actually I didn't hate The Fourth Kind too terribly much, but I did think that there was elements of it that I think could have been improved. But for whatever reason, I don't know why that movie was never produced. I mean, there's a lot of times in this what they don't tell you in screenwriting. So you can live your entire life off of just writing stuff for contests or writing stuff for, just getting optioned. You can have your entire career just have option scripts, and your screenplay options could be used for taxes because you can put those forward for income. And that shit's insane. I don't think I'd do that, strictly because I feel like I enjoy having my work produced, not just left to nothing. So, yeah, probably wouldn't be what I would do. But yeah, so the worst character, I don't know. I feel like everybody there wasn't there long enough for me to hate them, at least in any meaningful way. Although I did want to see more of this Zeph character. It's a shame that they had to kill him off like that. I thought he was going to actually be a long-term character. I mean, you don't put somebody like that in there. I mean, probably the fucking, mechanical elements of his character probably would have been, expensive to pull off all the time. So maybe that's probably a reason. But yeah, Michelle Yeoh was game for years. This was Kurtzman's baby because he loves Section 31. He fucking loves it. And the thing is, I think he loves it for all the wrong reasons. A lot of fans aren't really big, fans of the Section 31 as a concept. I actually don't mind it. I actually wish that if they were going to do Section 31, that they would at least do it in a way that made sense. And the only way it would make sense to me is if it was done in a way that was similar to Special Circumstances from Ian M. Banks's The Culture novels. But for whatever reason, I have a suspicion. Now, call me crazy, but Alex Kurtzman probably has not seen anything related or even read a single book by Ian M. Banks or even anything of the Culture novels. So I can't expect that. He's probably stupid and he thinks that Section 31 is some kind of a, like CIA, but it could be cool sometimes. And now you have Emperor Jojo, who's kind of a bad person, but trying to turn good, kind of. And I feel like that's what his logic is. I think that's what he was trying to do with it. But I want you to notice that he is not credited as being a story writer or a screenwriter for this movie. He basically just originated the idea, let some other people kind of puzzle it out, and then let somebody else write it, let somebody else direct it, and then look at the results. So my fear would be if he uses this as an excuse to take option or take the thing into his own hands and like say, now I need to do it personally. I must engage with this. I must take control and I must assume control and take it over. And I think that would be sort of terrifying. But I know for a fact we're probably going to end up with him being shut out, but very, 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 very close to sticking around. Because, I mean, if he sticks around and renews his contract for another 4 years, that's 20 years of Kurtzman Trek. That is amazing in terms of just time. Because that would automatically take the entire duration that Berman was in control of the franchise, plus this is going to be the terrifying number. So, if they renew his contract out to 2030, at that point, Kurtzman's reign on the Star Trek franchise would equal the time that Gene Roddenberry and Berman were both combined in charge of the franchise. So that would mean at that point, 50 years of Star Trek, or 60 years of Star Trek, rather, 65 at that point, for at least half the time, in terms of his production time, was under his belt. I don't think, because of the way seasons work now, I don't think he's anywhere close to producing the amount of Star Trek that Berman had produced. And I think Berman's still going to be the reigning king of this, the sheer number of episodes that were produced under his tutelage. But yeah, I don't see Kurtzman ever trying to get to that point, since there's just not that many episodes that they produce every year. I mean, every season's 10 episodes long now, and I think I didn't realize how cool that is, in a sense that it's easier to binge them, but it's also sad because it goes by so quick. I mean, I experienced this stuff with For All Mankind even, and eagerly waiting on the season 5 announcement for that to come out. But yeah, I don't know. I can only hope that they learn the best lessons from this, and I know they're not going to. But I would be interested in seeing them attempt to do a Section 31 thing that does represent something closer to special circumstances from the Culture novels. But I know they can't because they haven't read them. They don't read. The people in charge of Star Trek now are primarily TV writers. They're not writers that are like steeped in science fiction lore or history. So I think these are just people who are like, oh yeah, I like sci-fi. I watch things on occasion. Not that I want the whole franchise to be run by just fucking sci-fi and space nerds. I just want people who are good at writing stories, writing stuff. I mean, I would love for Star Trek to be able to tell comedy stories, be able to tell drama, be able to tell drama to a level that um, surpasses or exceeds stuff that we've seen in film, like what Denis Villeneuve has done, or even what Christopher Nolan has done, or even um, you know really strong pieces that I've seen already. You know, The Brutalist was a strong drama. Um, you know, producing things like these requires a lot of artistry, and when you don't put artists in charge of anything, you end up with what some have called slop. And I won't call it that, but it gets pretty close. So the autopsy of Section 31 is as follows. Not quite dead on arrival, but Star Trek is currently on life support. We're pretty much just hedging our bets on Star Trek Starfleet Academy and Star Trek Strange New Worlds to save the franchise. And both of these are tied to Star Trek Discovery, because if it wasn't for Star Trek Discovery, or if it wasn't for Star Trek Discovery season 2, we wouldn't have had Captain Pike under or being portrayed by um, our best man, or we wouldn't have the elements that are now being pushed to Starfleet Academy in the fourth millennium. So things aren't really good right now, and I hope they get better, but I fear they might not. And that's pretty much what I'm getting back to. So, Section 31 is pronounced dead, but not on arrival. I can only hope we get something soon that revitalizes the franchise and saves us from an eternity of basically Star Trek that is middling at best and has forgotten itself. I think that some of the Star Trek of the new era hasn't forgot what Star Trek is, what its essence is, but a lot of it is trending in a certain direction because certain executives are really, really, really fucking stupid. So I know a lot of people, and I didn't get a chance to address this a little while ago since I've restarted my operation here on YouTube. But I did want to address it before anything happens, and I think there's a lot of people talking about Star Trek Section 31 tonight, because this is the day that it premiered. It premiered this morning at midnight, I believe. Um, so that's why everybody's talking about it tonight. That's why there's a lot more activity on other people's channels. Those are larger channels, so I can't be too surprised. If you're watching this on the rewind, please do. I think I'm going to go to about an hour and a half, and then I'm going to call it quits, and then carry on with the other things I had to do today. But I will be coming back on Monday, not as a live stream, maybe just a tiny intro video. I'll probably produce a short that Wednesday next week, and then I'll probably do something to the effect of another live stream um, on Friday. So I'm probably going to get into this rhythm more now that we're no longer just Fleet Admiral Levi. We're now Fall. We're a little more open to our brand and kind of exploring new possibilities with what is afforded to us with this new rebrand. So I'll be going more into the character of Commander Levi. On some of the other shows I do, I'll be just appearing as myself, and then we'll see where that goes. But you know, I love Star Trek so much. It's been one of my favorite shows, one of my favorite franchises forever. But for some reason, I feel like the people in charge, they're there to produce something that is, I have no idea. I think they're just there to produce something that they feel is, I don't know, serviceable. I don't even want to call it serviceable. I think I might be doing too much work for it. Because whatever the case is, they're in charge. They're running the ship. They're going through all this. for some damn reason. I don't think it's all to push some kind of progressive agenda. Star Trek's always been some kind of progressive thing, but Star Trek is definitely not some fucking conservative thing either. That's for damn sure. But there's elements of it for some damn reason that people assume they take ownership of it and they think that Star Trek should only be about like empty adventures in space. Like none of this means anything. And like Star Trek means something. Star Trek meant something. Star Trek is something. And I'm hopeful that it'll get better. I feel like we're just going through a trough. We're going through a lull. And eventually things will get better. Because things do. Things always do. But you won't see me besmirching my favorite franchise. But I just wish I was in charge of it. Honestly, that's where my fucking ego, my neuroses would take me. I want to do an animated TV movie or TV series where we could, dive into the Star Trek novel series that Pocket Books produced. I would want to canonize Star Trek New Frontier. I would get us back to the 25th century. I would get us back to, post Picard, but way, way before Discovery stuff, because now we have an entire timeline to build up between the early 25th century and the fourth millennium. So we have a ton of shit to do there. I'd want to get back to telling stories that balance drama, that balance humor at times, that feel not like classic Star Trek. I don't want to get back to what the old people like, what the older Star Trek iterations have done. I don't want to tell TOS again. I don't want to do Next Gen again. I want to do the next thing in the franchise. I want to do something that gets us back to something that feels better, that hits us in the soul better, that tells us about characters that are reflections of ourselves, that does something that they're not doing right now, that they've decided to write off because I think that's too hard to write. It's the hackery of modern invention, the hackery of modern storytelling. And now with the invention of AI, the things are going to become even more awful in terms of storytelling. You're going to end up with stuff that's literally slop. I mean, like Netflix just said that they want to have screenwriters take this note, produce work that will be able to produce work that's essentially created strictly so that people who are doing their laundry or doing their dishes are basically have on the background. And make it to where people have to announce stuff. Like that kind of shit, it doesn't just like annoy me. That shit sends me through a fucking wall. That is such a death of artistry, worse than AI could ever produce. Because you're producing art that is not just terrible, you're producing something that is anti-art. You're producing something that doesn't mean a fucking thing, and you're pretending that it does on some level. No, that doesn't work. That doesn't work for me. It shouldn't work for anybody. They're only chasing the maximum amount of views that they can possibly achieve on any one project. And it's that kind of shit that should annoy everyone that has a pulse. But I know it's not. I know it can't. And I don't want the cynicism to defeat me. I don't want any of that shit to get to me. All I know is that I write my stuff. I use AI in some ways. I never use it to generate entire text. I think that's not good. I even have that as a stipulation on some of my class syllabi. You can use AI to outline, suggest you ideas, answer questions. You can use that tool to enhance your abilities, but don't use it to replace your abilities. Because at that point, what's the use? What's the point of doing anything? So maybe I'm just on a rant now. I have no idea. But either way, I'm planning to be back this next week to ensure that there's at least some voice in the void. It still stands for truth, justice, and the American way, if you will, in some way, in some sense. But whatever the case is, I'm not planning to go anywhere, but I am planning to tell my story, my stories, and I'm hoping that each and every one of you who are viewing me now or in the future or in the past, and I hope you stick around for the journey we have ahead. We're going to be getting a lot more things in. We're going to get a lot more guests on. We're going to get a lot more access to, um, tons of things that this channel hasn't had before. I mean, we've only started since May last year, but we're going to go to a completely different level. Um, we're going to go really hard this year, and I hope that you're all here to enjoy it. So please tune in to me. I'll be on the. I'll post a thing for it, a notification that I'll be reviewing the Space 1999 episode Death's Other Dominion on the Space 1999 podcast show with Warren F. Friedrich and Roy Bilgequist. So please join me. And yeah, for that discussion, it'll be 4 p.m. Pacific time if you've watched all the way to the end. Yeah, I look forward to seeing you there. I look forward to having this conversation. I love Space 1999. It's one of my favorite shows. It's also just as instrumental on me as Star Trek is. I have been thinking, might run it by Trek Central, but about doing like a live sort of thing, but like for tabletop gaming. So it'd be like Star Trek RPG tabletop game. I think that might be fun. But yeah, you'll see me on Saturday, tomorrow, 4 p.m. And you'll see me again on Monday for the little intro video. And then you'll see me on Wednesday and possibly Friday. So I might not be posting much the week after that. I mean, I'm planning to post stuff that's scheduled the following week, but I'm getting married. So everything that gets posted that week will probably be pre-produced. And then the week after that, we'll dive into everything else. So yeah, it's going to be an adventure. It's going to be a great 2025. I hope you guys have all had a great year so far. And definitely Happy New Year to everybody. I didn't get a chance to say that. So, yeah. Despite everything happening in the world today, I'm optimistic we'll get through it. And I know we'll all do better. I know we'll all get to the big, glorious future that Star Trek presents itself. Although I do feel like, even though Star Trek might inspire a bold, beautiful future, I think that the future we eventually achieve will be something even beyond the imagination and beyond the scope that Star Trek even dreams. So I don't know if any of us will be here to enjoy it, but I know that some of us will definitely enjoy just the possibility that we could get to it. So anyway, I think that about does us for today. I hope you enjoyed yourselves. We'll definitely be having more guests on in the coming weeks, as I mentioned, so just keep that in mind. But yeah, we'll do our typical little sign off. So I haven't posted anything in terms of what topics I'll be discussing next week. It'll be contingent on a few ideas I have kicking around, but we might still follow the format we were following before with covering a topic. We're not going to go for like doing a sci-fi, fantasy, or horror month, at least not till the end of the year. So that'll be kind of off. That won't be kind of a concern going into this rest of the year. We'll be just covering different ideas, inviting new guests on, and kind of going that way. So this is sort of a one-off video. I don't plan to do. This is not a review channel. This is a world building channel, and I could have gone a while with the world building because I don't think this movie really covered a lot of the world building elements I would have expected in a Star Trek. I mean, there's no Federation stuff in this movie practically, other than Section 31 and then Rachel Garrett referencing Starfleet. So yeah, we got some problems. But either way, I'm hoping to post some kind of a schedule over the next week that'll kind of keep you guys cognizant of where we'll be and what the topics we'll be discussing. I'm going to try to keep the the posts to the mornings. Like on Mondays and Wednesdays, I'll post usually at 3 a.m. That's what I schedule them out to. And then we'll do our lives in the evenings, kind of like this. A little different, but kind of like this. But yeah, I hope you tune into that when the time comes, if it strikes your interest. And with that, we're going to come up with a different sign off in the coming weeks. I'm still kind of kicking around some ideas, but for now, don't panic. Don't forget your towel. And until next time, I've been the Phil, and so long, and thanks for all the fish.